Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Future of Customer Service podcast by Inbenta. This is Jordi Torres, and I have the honor today to be introducing Hans van Dam, who is working on a very interesting project, a very interesting company called Conversational Design Institute. So I'm really happy and honored to welcome Hans over here. How are you, Hans?
I'm wonderful, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Where are you located right now?
I'm in Amsterdam, yeah. So the whole company is based in Amsterdam. I know we have people sort of scattered around the world, but we're based here.
Amazing. Okay, I'm having this session from Santa Cruz, California. So it's amazing. The 21st century, we talk to each other as if you were around the corner. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I've been to Santa Cruz once, and I just remember being stuck in traffic all day. So that's
okay. That was a pre-pandemic world. Now. The good news about COVID-19 is that traffic jams are no more. Most of the folks work from home, and that, let's say, one of the few advantages of that is, being able to not to be in a traffic jam. Hey, I have so many questions for you because, we know you guys for a while at Inbenta. We know that you work with some of our customers, helping them, understanding them a lot about their conversational design. So I can't wait to start, asking a few questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I was born ready. Right. You bring it on.
Awesome. So, Hans, what do you do at Conversational Design Institute?
I guess that's the good question, right? So we help companies, make their AI assistants more human centric through design. So my background is really as a copywriter. I started out, I always wanted to be a writer, like a novelist. Nobody was interested in that. So I became a copywriter, and I work with tech companies. And then I ended up working in customer service for a bit. And then when conversational interfaces became a thing, I was like, hey, I can probably figure this out because I know how to write dialogues, and I understand the technology from sort of my time at an incubator, and I understand customer service because I'd worked in customer service. So I figured I'm going to figure out how to do this, and that's sort of where we've discovered that new job, a new role called conversation design, right? Where we saw that a lot of these conversational AI projects were very much engineering focused. And a lot of companies were not successful because they would just put engineers in a room to then automate the conversations they had with their customers. So that didn't really work. So we were like, okay, we need to figure out how to actually design these interactions, how to write these dialogues. And we started exploring that. And our reasoning was that, if you have an artificial brain talk to a human brain, then technology, psychology, and language should all be equally important. And so we take a lot of expertise from behavior design of figuring out how people think and behave and interact. And we create an entire workflow around that. And that's what sort of kicked off the company. So what we now do is we train and certify conversation designers, mainly for enterprises. And we have a consultancy that helps them as well. And what we see is, companies are looking to automate conversations with people. About 85%, a lot of them, they try to automate about 85% of conversation that they have with people. And to do that, they use conversational AI technology. And we sort of see these enterprises build in-house teams around this, right? They need technology and they need people. And we try to figure out what do these people do? What's the skill set that they need? How do they work together? And that's where we really come in to help that.
Absolutely. That's fascinating, right? Because there's a lot of technology out there solving AI, machine learning, NLP, and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what is this chatbot going to say? And this is what I am understanding now is that you guys help your customers to do that.
That's so the way we saw the market initially is that there are a lot of companies out there that were selling hammers, and we're the only one that are training carpenters.
Wow! That's I love that. I love that sentence. That makes a lot of sense. Everybody's trying to sell hammers, small, big, and say, okay, what I'm going to do with it. Oh, absolutely. So, what is the kind of problem that your customers perceive when they call you?
Yeah.
Why customers call you?
Yeah. So a lot of times you have an enterprise that has bought into that promise of conversational AI technology. So they've bought it, they've invested in it, and at the end of the day, it's just not delivering. People aren't talking to it, or they're not enjoying talking to it, or they drop out of conversations immediately, and then they discover that there's something that is new, that they need to figure this out, and that's when they start to reach out. So if you look at going from graphical interface to mobile to now AI assistance. If you look at it from design, you used to have graphical interface design, then UX design became a thing with mobile, and now all of a sudden it's conversation design. It's an entire new field and an entire new craft that people are exploring. So what enterprises have, they've got the technology, they have people, but then they discover that these people completely lack the skill set because they don't understand how to create these human centric conversational experiences. They don't know the dynamics. Language is very complex. I mean, you're on the other end of the spectrum, figuring out what people say, but we're on the other side trying to make sure that people also feel understood. And that's really that's where we come in. That's the problem that we
Got it.
solve for these customers.
That makes a lot of sense. And how do you know the job is done? What is the objective? What are you trying to accomplish when you've engaged with a customer on one of your
Yeah,
projects?
that's a good question. So a lot of times, so our belief is that they will eventually have their own team. And people ask, how many do I need? I often ask, how many UX designers do you have? Well, we have about 40. Well, then you're probably going to have about 40 people working on your chatbot, 5 years from now. So that's where we want to get them. A lot of times when we have these enterprise engagements, we show up with our own consultants and we first do the work for them. We kind of show them, like, we make sure that the top journeys are handled well, that your tone of voice is set, that your key journeys are done in a proper way. At the same time, we start educating their team. So we find the right people in your organization. Then we have an online academy with video lectures, and we do workshops to slowly scale up that team and sort of take them by the hands. And we kind of do it together. And then we kind of go more and more to the background. And we'll be on call when you need us, but over time the goal is to let an enterprise have their own conversational AI team with people that have a structured workflow, that know what to do, that make sure that there's empathy, that makes sure that customers get their problems solved and their questions answered.
That makes a lot of sense. So, a question. Let's say I am a customer of yours, right? And I say, hey, I need my team to learn all these things. What pre-existing knowledge or skills should my people have? In other words, what should they know already to before talking to you, or what is
Mhm.
what when you feel more comfortable with working with
Yeah.
teams?
So what we see, so we have three certificates now, and they've sort of emerged over the work that we've done, and we defined three roles. There's the AI trainer that really turns data into understanding. Part of that is training a language model. Your customers won't have to do that because that's handled, but they also go over the analytics and try to find improvements, etc. Those people often, overqualified customer service people, they're often, very used to working in complex systems and talking to customers. So they're human centric. They're not afraid of some software and technology. So a lot of times you'll see like overqualified customer service reps or very light data science sort of going into those roles. If you look at the conversation designer, what they do is to really think about the structure of the conversation. Like, how do we, in a natural, human centric way, create a flow for a conversation? And a lot of times, these are your content managers, content writers, also some customer service people that are more language savvy, or UX designers, sort of that background, end up in those roles. And then there's the conversational copywriter that really thinks about tone of voice, the real wording, that thinks more about behavior. Like, how do I say things in a way that I control people do. These are your expert copywriters. These are also people with a background in screenwriting and creative writing, and psychology. So people from marketing, people from communication. That's often sort of every role has their own little group of people with their
Got
own
it. Got it.
unique backgrounds.
That is super interesting because as we are in the same space. That idea of overqualified contact center agent, that's a really fascinating concept because at some point, that call centers have a high turnover rate,
Yeah.
right? And folks working in call centers, they might already be looking for another job, is a temporary job. But here, what you are telling me is like, hey, actually, you learn a lot of your company, your business, your customer service, and then you can use that knowledge to empower your entire organization with the right
Yeah.
training, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of enterprises struggle with that career path for, they have smart people in a service center, and a lot of them join the service center during their studies, during college, university, and they sort of do customer service work on the side, and then either they graduate and they leave, or a lot of them, don't grad. There's always a few that never graduated and sort of stuck in that role for longer. Whether actually very smart, they're creative people. And you can actually, if you take them by the hand and say, all of a sudden there's opportunities for them. Usually you would go from being an agent to maybe a supervisor, and if you're lucky, you become like the contact center manager in a way, right? But now you can actually go from service agents to AI trainer to conversation designer to copywriter to product owner. All of a sudden there's an entire path into the world of conversational AI.
Wow, wow. So
And
there are two benefits here, right? On one hand, the company may retain that talent through this professional career and path, and then at the end of the day, the company also benefits from a better AI and a better automation, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really key, and I think a lot of people sort of don't realize what kind of value they have in terms of talent in that organization already. So one of the things that we're also working on is using an assessment to sort of, if you have 500 service agents, we will be able to tell you very quickly with one psychological test who could potentially join your chatbot team. So we
Wow.
identify those people, then we scale them up, we guide them, and we make sure that you end up with that conversational AI
So you
department.
have those tests already
Yeah,
as part of that's amazing. That's a very
and
sophisticated process. I
yeah,
can tell.
and so what we could eventually do is we can do an audit on your chatbot and say, our philosophy is kind of like the more conversations you have, the better they should be. If you look at volume versus experience design, the more you talk, the better it should be. So we can look at how many interactions do you have, what should the quality be in terms of experience, and then if you're below that, why is that? Maybe you don't have the right people. So let's go out and find people in your organization that can get you to that next level potentially. Everybody has people that are very strong writers, and sort of write, in their evenings and write stories or write blog posts. Well, those people are perfect. And, you just explain them a little bit about technology, and then, they can join the team. I think it's easier to teach creative people about, how a chatbot works than to teach an engineer how to write very creatively. And so all of a sudden you have these career opportunities in AI for people, that have no background in technology.
Absolutely. Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk objectives, right? Say, okay, we engage with you guys. We have this project. What is the tangible goals and the tangible objectives that you will help create?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the simplest things is, containment of a conversation. So making sure people get to the end of a conversation, that completion rate. So making sure that they get, people get help, so that they don't have to go to the agent, and you just lower the volume in your service center. That is usually really the one that is the main objective, what we come in for. Uh, so it's making this conversation that you have more successful. And a lot of times it's obviously also with intent-based models or machine learning models, making sure the recognition of questions goes up as well, right? So there's understanding better, improving cognition, and also improving completion rate of these conversations
Yeah.
while
So
while
something.
maintaining NPS, but actually they go hand in hand.
Absolutely. So you can actually measure, therefore, return on investment, right? You say,
Yeah,
okay, we engage that team, now it's trained, and now the products they are producing and the benefits is something tangible that we can measure every day, and not only today, but every day after that, because these new skilled people will create content that will stay forever. So that
yeah.
that return investment is something that companies will enjoy, not only when immediately after these people have the skills, the newest skills, but they will stay there for a long time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And with one client, what we're actually doing now is running tests where we can actually say, in different countries across markets, like if we change this little phrase in this message, what's the impact really in return on investment? So there's like we change 3 words, and at the end of the year, it's going to save them a couple $1,000, right? And we can do that for each message.
Wow.
And some of the things that like the key in conversation design, sort of the workflow that we teach, that's kind of what our teams do. If we really dumb it down in just a few steps, um, we mentalize the context of the conversation. So we don't just say like, oh, somebody lost their bank card and therefore they need a new one. It's like, oh wait, what's actually going on? Someone's insecure, they're upset, they lost a bank card, they can't pay. Maybe they're worried even about paying groceries tomorrow and they have a kid to feed. Like, what's actually the dynamics of a conversation? So we want to understand that. And then what we do is we have the conversation. We role play the conversation, figuring out what goes on. And if we sort of do improvisational theater almost on there, and I say something to you, you're going to respond to it, and you're going to, any concern or thought that you might have, it comes out, and it allows me to sort of capture everything and create like a first draft of the conversation, and then we validate that with other people. So we sort of test that real quick. We create a first draft, we test it out if the conversation flows the way we want it to, and then we optimize that for behavior. And what that means is that we'll sort of apply like a layer of psychology to make sure that the success rate of a conversation is much better. So if I say ask me a question, you can ask me any question. If I use some smart framing and I say ask me a question about a glass of water, ask me a question about water, you're probably going to ask me a question about water, right? So already there, by using behavior psychology and specific wording, I can already guide my user to resolution. So first, what I do is through that role playing exercise, I create a lot of empathy. And if I talk to you in a way that you feel understood, you have a lot of confidence in that I'm going to get you to the resolution as well, right?
Yeah,
So if I
absolutely.
if I show
Absolutely.
a yeah, if I show empathy, you're coming on the journey with me, and then I might identify a few issues where maybe I need to ask you 5 questions instead of saying here's question 1, here's question 2, here's question 3. If I say I'm going to ask you 5 questions, for most people this only takes a minute. What I'm doing now is I'm using social proof and I'm using expectation management, and this removes stress on your end. So you feel understood. So I'm going to get you to the resolution. Now you might feel some barriers. So I'm using social proof and expectation management to guide you to the end of the conversation. And that's really the skill set that we sort of teach you and that we have applied on these chatbots to increase the success rate of them.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about hammers for a second, right? So I love that symbolism, right? It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
everybody is interested in selling hammers. We teach carpenters. I love that. But my question is, when you have your customer, I'm assuming that at the end of the day, the company is already engaged or working with some kind of technology, specific technology, and
Yeah.
the classic subjects, right? There's Louis and Dialogflow and Watson and all these guys and Inbenta, right? It's like everybody trying to be there. selling their own hammer. So my question is, what once you have a team that is trained by you guys and as using as a background a specific technology, how difficult it is for that team to then move to another tool. So in other words, you to which extent if a company trains their team in conversation design for one specific tool, if the tool gets replaced, how
Yeah.
much of this training is can be reused?
Yeah, that's a nice one. So we train people. What we preach is voice first. Our belief there is that if you can figure it out with voice, which is the minimum real estate that you can have in an interface, if you can figure out the conversation through voice, you can also use it in voice, but also in a chatbot or on third-party chatbot. And you can even use a button and a picture all of a sudden. But if you figure it out with voice, you can use it everywhere. So that's the first thing in our entire workflow. Everything is voice first. The next one is really technology agnostic. So we teach people how to create a good conversation. And now we teach them, particularly with the AI training stuff, it's also very generic. It's really, how do people talk? How do we understand that there's different ways of saying things? How do we make sure that we have a model and a structure, and everything is technology agnostic. And if you train people, in a technology agnostic way, it becomes much easier for them to, work with different hammers. So we do see a lot of these, the usual suspects, these tech companies, where they have their own course on their specific product, but it's really like stepping into a car and it's like, yeah, so here's where the key is and here's where the dials is, but you still don't know how to drive, right? So you need to learn how to drive. And then if you have a different car, it doesn't really matter. It's like, oh, where's the navigation? Where's the air conditioning? How does this work here? Oh, wait. So it's the linguistic model. All right, perfect. I don't have to bother with that too much, right? So you can spend like a day or maybe a day or two to familiarize yourself with a new technology. But let's say you were first, if you're used to such an easy to use platform like Inbenta, and all of a sudden they swap it for some reason, I don't know, with IBM Watson, half your team is going to go home with a burnout, or at least call in sick, or like, yeah, that's too difficult for me, right? Whereas if you teach people how to craft a proper conversation, and how do you want to talk to people, and how do we make sure that we have the frameworks in place to create that conversation, you can deploy it with any technology and on any conversational interface.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So, Hans, can you can you tell us about some practical example, some specific situation, some use case? Delight us with some of the of the examples that you've been working
Delight
on
us
there.
with some of the things.
Yes.
Well, there's so many to do. So what we see now, a lot of it, we now see more and more internal chatbots, which are kind of fun. I think one of the things to point out there, it's very much like, how frequent does your customer talk to the assistant, has a lot to do with how you want to talk back to them. So these are always interesting things to think about, right? So if I'm a customer and I only have like a billing relationship with my company, and I only show up if there's a problem, I have an entirely different tone of voice than when I'm an employee chatbot that's helping out on a daily basis, and there's much more engagement and there's a lot more fun. So in those internal chatbots where you want to have lots of adoption, it helps to create a lot of personality content, which is fun. So when you design a chatbot, we always create a persona. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like the tone of voice and the backstory of the assistant. And you create something like that. But then there's also something called personality content. So that's chit chat, little jokes, little Easter eggs to make it more fun and engaging. And what it does is actually it makes people more forgiving, right? So if I only have a few use cases, um, but I do have an engaging personality, then and there is more to do than just that one question. It becomes a very delightful experience all of a sudden. So we had this on a cruise ship where there's like smart speakers, and people would talk to it, But it really, it's too many. Like there's too much stuff going on a cruise ship, right? There's all these different buffets and entertainment things. So in terms of like use cases and all the stuff they could do, it's kind of limited because it was too complex. So what we do is we actually add a lot of personality content. So it's like, hey, when is the sushi bar open? Hey, I'm not sure, but then actually have some reference to sushi in an engaging experience. It makes people much more forgiving. So those kind of little things are always fun to think about. Like, what's the frequency of interactions that you have with customers? What do they expect of the assistant? That sort of influences your tone of voice and the content that you're going to produce. There's so many things, I guess. I just realized now. What was the question? I guess the question was, do you have a tangible example? I guess, I mean, there's the one of what I said earlier, like this psychology would be, like those are a lot of good examples. Like, and what is identified a lot of times, and I think this is key for everyone to understand really. When you design a conversation, have the conversation, right?
Totally.
Say it out loud. Try it out. Have people interact with it, and then where the conversation goes flat, if we do that role play and I ask you a question and you're quiet for 2 seconds, probably means it was too difficult what I said, and you're processing it. So it's a flag on the play, and I have to rewrite that and figure out how I can then use behavior psychology to solve for that problem. A lot of times there's cognitive overload. Our messages are too long. Very simple rule of thumb: if you can't say it in one breath, it's probably too long.
Wow, that's another very practical.
And it's like, oh yeah, like I'll get okay. If we go practical, this is what we see a lot. Company has a long answer, it's too long. You want to say the whole message out loud, takes more than one breath. Okay, it's too long. So what we then do is the Jenga technique. So you're familiar with the game Jenga, right? The tower of
sort of.
Yeah. So you've got this tower of little blocks. You take out these blocks, and whoever makes the tower collapse loses the game. Well,
Yes.
we do that with writing. When you write, usually you can remove about 50% of the words that you've written. You can go back to anyone listening to this, go to your emails, go to your blogs that you've written, go to your chatbot. A lot of times you can take out 50% of the words without the tower of meaning collapsing in your message.
Still being there.
Yeah, so it's still there. So check how long it is. Take out about 50% of the words. You'll discover that the message is still there. And then you rewrite that a little bit, where what we always have is an acknowledgement. That's kind of what you're doing now. Like, you're nodding your head. What is that in a chatbot? It's like, okay, check, sure, makes sense. Like a little phrase like that tells the user that you've listened. Then you use a confirmation, which signals to the user that you've understood what they said. And then you have a prompt where you ask a question to signal to the user that it's their turn to speak again. So look at your message. If it's too long, take out words, then apply acknowledgement, confirmation, and a prompt. Your chatbot's going to perform, I don't know, a lot better probably tomorrow if you do that.
And I believe it was Blaise Pascal, this French philosopher, who at some point had a very long letter sent to somebody and said, okay, sorry, this letter is very long because I didn't have much time to write it, right? So it's exactly what you say. It's like, well, if you don't if you don't work on the content, you end up with too long content. So being long, it doesn't mean it's well worked. It might be just the opposite, right?
It's usually is the opposite, and it's really those simple rules of thumb. If you make a checklist and have that there and figure out how to do that, life becomes much easier.
Absolutely. All right. Time flies talking to you. Really, it's amazing what you guys have accomplished and the kind of knowledge that you are providing. Unfortunately, we have this limitation on the podcast that we need to stick in. So how people can find you? How can contact you?
I'm not that hard to find, so conversationdesigninstitute.com is the easiest way. I'm on LinkedIn, Hans van Dam, Twitter, HVDAM. Really, if you Google Hans chatbot, you'll probably find me.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna do that right now. I'm gonna put Hans
Oh God,
chatbot,
no.
and this is Google. And here we go. Here you are.
Yeah,
All
yeah. Okay,
right.
good,
That's
good, good.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh
All right.
God.
So thank you so much for being here. It's a really honor to having you here and sharing all this knowledge with us. And I believe that our audience will really appreciate, because I think that there are many takeaways already for all of us from this conversation. So I want to thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to doing more work together.
Absolutely. Here we go. All right,
All
Hans.
right.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good
Bye
one.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.